Everybody, my name is Nora Lenz, and if you are new to this channel, rotational monofeeding, or RMF for short, I'll just tell you that I am the developer of a home feeding method about 15 years ago for dogs for all kinds of physical ailments, and I suppose mental ones too, every kind of ailment. That reverses disease in many, many cases. And it's all about just removing the cause. And the cause of most disease, believe it or not, you won't hear this from vets, but the cause of most disease is what you put in their mouths, what they put in their mouths, what you feed them every day. That's the cause. And it's rampant because almost everybody feeds their dog commercial dog food. And commercial dog food is very bad, despite what the commercials and the packaging says. There's some very clever marketing and lots of money that goes into that to try to convince you that it's healthy, but it's not. Anyway, so in the course of things, teaching people how to feed their dogs properly, I get lots of testimonials from people, just unsolicited testimonials for every kind of dog malady known to man and woman. And the latest one that I received a couple weeks ago was from a person named Paige Dent, and she had a little dog, a little Springer Spaniel named Coco, who reversed her seizures. So I invited Paige to do a little video today so we could talk about Coco and her experiences and what she did and all of that, just to let people know that there are other ways of managing seizures, no matter what the so-called triggers are or the causes, and we'll talk about that more, than just drugging your dog for the rest of his life. So anyway, right now I would like to introduce Paige Dent and thank her. Thank you, Paige, for being willing to do this.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to finally talk volumes of what's been going on in my heart and mind for the last better part of a year, really.
Super. Yeah, great. I know.
An intense journey.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes people can just hardly wait to tell me how, their dogs are healthy. They haven't had to take them to the vet for years and years, decades even.
I still think we're 10 months in our 11th month actually of the diet. But so I still think, I don't know the end of the story, but I know what we have experienced so far has been incredible. So I'm so confident in that. I'm so sure that we're going in the right direction. And I can't really wait to see, because I'm often surprised at what I see. I didn't ask for that. I thought, oh, that's a bonus. So that's definitely been part of it, but part of the process.
And you never know when the transition is done, when the healing is complete. It happens faster in younger dogs, and your dog happens to be young than it does in older dogs. But you just never really know. And what typically happens, and what you saw, I think, is that the events or the symptoms or whatever, they just take place less and less frequently. So let's talk a little bit about your first experiences with having a seizuring dog, and when that happened, how old she was, and what it looked like, and what you did about it.
Okay, so she was about 3.5 at the time. I remember she had been ill. Okay, so she stopped eating for like 24 hours, and then finally she kind of withdrew, and her ears were really smelly. She was real stinky. And I looked, and it was bright red. So I did what you do. I did the sort of commercial clean out stuff, and then she started shaking the head. And then everything seemed to calm down, and she ate again. I thought, okay, she's fine. She had a little whatever, and she's over it. And then about a week later, I woke up 3 o'clock in the morning to the sound of just thrashing around in the kitchen. Came downstairs, and she was on her side, full on convulsion. I don't know how long the first one lasted. And, foam coming out of her mouth, the whole thing. And I was absolutely hysterical, had never witnessed a seizure in my life, had never heard of it happening in such a young dog. And I went upstairs, and my husband he's an osteopath, so he's clinically trained. And he said, I think she's had a seizure. And I said, what in the world could have caused her to have a seizure? So he said, don't worry about it. It's a one-off probably, because dogs sometimes have them. Everybody's got a seizure threshold. Okay, that was fine. Well, it turns out over the course of the next couple of weeks, she had a few more. And so I did what you do, and I Googled. Now, she would be absolutely fine after the seizures. She would just get up, totally fine. She might be a little disoriented, and then she would just be totally normal. So I was like, they say it's a vet emergency if they have 3 seizures in a row. And she had 3 seizures within 12 hours. So
Within
Google
12
says,
hours. Oh.
yes. Oh, yes. Oh, Nora, it gets worse. I mean, this is unbelievable what we witnessed, which is why I have so many questions about seizures now. And what a vet emergency actually is.
Was there anything that preceded that, the ear, the messy ears, the itchy ears, the lack of appetite? Was there like any drug use? Like I'm thinking of like the flea meds, the preventatives, any of that stuff?
Because we never put her on any of that. Never
That
had
stuff.
any flea meds, never had the tick
Really?
stuff.
Okay.
I've never, she
Okay.
didn't have routine vaccinations. She was fed raw. So there I was.
She was fed raw. She was fed raw.
She was fed raw, commercial raw.
Commercial raw for 3 years. She was 3 at this point.
3 years she was on raw. However, I have to admit that I would also augment it with kibble, because it was my sort of I would think, oh, that gives a little bit of variety,
Insurance.
And a little bit of,
right.
Yeah, insurance, exactly, because it's fortified and this, that, and the other. And so I was mixing those two together. So anyway, after that seizure, we called the vet and said, look, she's had 3. They said, is she all right in herself? Yeah, she's fine. Let's see her. They brought her in, and the first thing the vet did was look at her ear, and she said, oh, this is the worst ear I've ever seen. She's got a terrible ear infection. We're going to deal with that first. That may be the reason she's having the seizures, was what they said. So I was like, fine. And my whole thought was, great. We'll take care of it. She won't have another seizure. We'll do the antibiotics. We did. She had a course of that. 7 days later, when I was due to take her back into the vet for them to clear her for the ear, she then has another cluster of 3. So I thought we were doing well. Then I called the vet and said, look, can I bring her in a day early, because she's just had 3 more. So when I brought her, then she said, yeah, the ear looks fine and that's all clear. But we think she's got idiopathic epilepsy.
They do any testing? Do they do any diagnostics?
They said, we're going to do some testing. And so they did.
They mentioned idiopathic epilepsy before seizures. Did they say epilepsy?
Sorry, she mentioned it the first time. Whenever she went in for the ear thing, the vet said, look, with a dog this young, a dog between, 0 and 6 years old, we make a presumption of idiopathic epilepsy when we see especially repeated seizures like this. And my thinking about that is, if you had a dog that was reacting to some sort of an insult, a flea medication, a tick, there would be other signs, or they had got into some poison. Do you see what I mean? There would be a dog that acts completely normal between seizures. At this age, they're saying, okay, this is a genetic problem, is the way they look at it, right?
Well, idiopathic to us means unknown causes, right? But when they talk about causes, they do not talk about causes. They talk about the origin of the symptom in the body. Like if it's a certain kind of seizure, like they will talk about another symptom and say that's causing the seizure. They will say that distemper causes seizures. They will say that, what are some other things that cause, they will even say that vestibular disease, which is the imbalance of fluids that can cause seizures. But these are concurrent symptoms. They're not causes. And so idiopathic has no meaning for our purposes. For us who want to really get to the underlying causes, it has no meaning for us.
Well, this is exactly what happened, Nora, why I ended up here, basically, because when they said to me, you're basically doing, when they say to you, we can't do anything about it,
Yeah.
the bloods are fine, the neurological examination is fine. Her lipase was a bit elevated, interestingly enough, which I thought about later. It didn't strike me as funny before. They said, look, all of her signs are, we don't know what happens. We know this happens with certain dogs.
Mhm.
We, think it's deeper. Anyway,
Yeah, it is. But they don't know
yeah,
the source of that either.
no, the hell they don't. And she, I kind of left there thinking, okay, so you've just condemned us and our dog to a lifetime of medication from which you said you can do nothing more than reduce severity, frequency, and duration of seizures, whilst potentially causing harm. It's basically trial and error at our expense. And I was quite frankly angry because I thought we spend more time with diagnostics on our automobiles than we do our dogs. You wouldn't let me drive out of the service station with my engine sensor on, having just smashed up the sensor so I didn't have to deal with it anymore. You'd actually
Right.
figure out what's going on in
Right.
the engine.
But
And
the
I thought,
but
how?
the problem is that diagnosing in the veterinary field isn't really like uncovering a problem in a car that you can fix, because diagnosing is mostly about informing the drugging
No.
decisions. It's
Right.
all about trying to find out which drug to administer. And if we're dealing with a holistic vet, it's about which herbal product to dispense, or
Yeah.
which no-sode, or which, homeopathic remedy, or whatever. So it really, that's why diagnosing isn't as important as people
Pointless.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's pretty much all caused by the same thing. And you just save so much money just alone by assuming that it's all caused by toxemia and fixing that. And then if that doesn't fix it, okay, then let's do a little diagnosing. Maybe there's
Right. That
some
is,
impairment of an organ that isn't going to be healable.
it took a long time for me to kind of reconcile that in myself. Um, you know what I mean? To actually come to the conclusion that actually, once we reduce the toxic burden, if we don't see the results then maybe it's something else that
Right.
we may not be able to
Right.
access, we may or may not. But I was actually heartbroken that that was all they were going to give me. Here I was, my dog was fitting, I was getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, it was upsetting our whole household. Here she was not the same dog, and they're saying the only thing you can do is give you these drugs. And so we started her on the drug. So we started her on, yes, we did, because even though in my heart I didn't accept it, ultimately, I never accepted, oh, she's epileptic, because I thought if I condemn her to that label, it's like agreeing with something in myself, and I just wasn't willing yet because I didn't know enough about it. I hadn't, it just, I wasn't ready to say, all right, you, it's not like they had done any research or any, as I said, they didn't spend any time on it. They just said, we presume it's this. So I
Right.
can't accept that.
Mm-hmm.
But I was devastated because I didn't know what else to do. Didn't know where to turn, had no clue. I had heard about people using diet um, to, and they would say things like, oh yeah, we just changed the diet, we tweaked this, we did that, and the seizures went away. So, I mean, I immediately stopped doing the kibble, but I kept on with the commercial raw. And the seizures, I think once she took the phenobarbital, we had like 25 days without a seizure. And so we thought, okay, well,
Was
um,
that a daily drug that you gave her?
it was daily. Yeah.
Oh. Oh, a constant drug stupor. This dog is in a constant drug stupor, a drugged state
That's
perpetually.
right.
just to
Now,
prevent that seizure from being seen by us, because it's doing nothing about the causes, whatever the triggers are. It's doing nothing about the triggers. It's doing nothing about the causes. It's doing something about the effect. And it's just, so nothing inside the dog is changing. The organs are being burdened by the elimination of this drug, dealing with this drug, neutralizing this drug and getting it out of the body. But
that's right.
nothing's changed except we can't see the seizure.
Right.
It's
And
like turning,
actually,
using that car analogy. Sorry, using that car analogy, it's like turning the light off in your car and just sending you off down the road, turning the engine light off
that's what I'm
and just
saying,
saying it's fixed.
and that's what they do.
Yeah.
They say this is the way we handle this in every situation. But
Right.
it was
Right.
it's not a one size fits all situation. For me, it was very personal because this is my pet, so I've got to figure something else out here. The problem is that, you see, not all animals actually get the sedation effect through the phenobarbital, and that's why they put them on polytherapies quite quickly. So what happened in our case was I suspected that she was refractory quite quickly, because after that 1 month where we had a little, you know, it just subsided a little bit. So we had a break, and then she had, she started to have more, and not only more, but they would just, they would kind of, everything was increasing in terms of severity, duration, and frequency. It was not going the other way,
Wow. Even with the drugs.
even with the drug. So we called the vet and said, look, this is getting worse. We don't like this. They said, you need to up the dose. And so, and of course they're going to say that, because that's their only. So we did. We upped the dose. Guess what? It helped nada. We didn't even get an extra week without fitting. So here we are dealing with the dog on drugs, the fitting, the vet bills, the whole thing. And we're just, it was just, I could see the future in the offing. This dog was going to be a polytherapy dog, no doubt about it. And who knows? And then I started reading the PubMed journals, the old articles that vets had written about these horrible AEDs and how this was tragic and devastating. We need to find another way. I started looking at studies that might be done on, they don't fund a lot of studying for a lot of studies on food and epilepsy, but they're starting to look at it a little bit. But of course, they're now making dog foods that are supposed to be tailored.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we just started. I then suspected that she was refractory, and
I don't know. I've never heard that term. What does that mean, Paige?
Right. So this is very interesting too, Nora, to go along with this. But a dog that is refractory to drugs, this may apply to all animals. They say that they are not drug sensitive. They're called them non-drug sensitive dogs. It's upwards of 60% of dogs.
So they could take like triple, quadruple, and it's still not going to have any effect.
They neutralize it fast, and it just goes. So obviously not without harm, but I suspected this quite early on. And interestingly enough, I came across an article where a vet was saying, we're getting too many of these dogs. They are refractory. We need to make that decision sooner because we're dragging these people down the line. And, they will lie and say that it's 30%. At this point, I suspect it's more, because whilst we have been going through this process, which I don't know about you, but I hadn't really heard about a young dog just starting to have seizures all the time until it happened to our dog, until that started happening. But in the course of this past year, well, let's say from 2020 to now, our dog, one of my Pilates clients, her dog, he starts. My friend's sister's dog, she starts going, all puppies. And then my client I was telling you about, her son-in-law and their dog started fitting, all within this period of time. 2 of those dogs are now passed on.
Right.
The one that I know more about, because she was in my studio every week, kind of reporting on it. They had him on a polytherapy within 4 months.
And
So,
polytherapy is, for those who aren't familiar, it's taking
oh,
many drugs, different
yeah.
approaches at the same time.
So when the Pexion doesn't work, they add the potassium bromide, or they add the phenobarbital, I think is the go-to. When that one doesn't work, they add the potassium bromide or levetiracetam or whatever it's called. Kepra, I think they have different ones in their arsenal. There are no real new ones. They don't even have effective, real studies on these in the animals because they can't test them on dogs really. So they're just taking our word for it, and what they see in the practice. So no, it's a mess. The whole field is an absolute mess. But anyway, I suggested to her, I said, I think, you might ask if they suspect that he's refractory, because if he is, you're going to have to change your tack here because that's not working.
Yeah, it's
And
just going
he
to
was
destroy his
sedated.
organs.
He was so heavily sedated, Nora, it was the saddest thing. And they just at a certain point said, we can't do anything. And here she was bringing me the pheasant and the partridge that her husband was shooting on the weekends because they weren't going to eat it, and they knew that I was feeding raw to heal my dog. And she
Wow, they
wasn't going
had
to
the
change it.
means to feed their own dog the best food in the world, and they didn't.
She was too scared to change because the vet told her don't. I said, why don't you just try the diet and the drug? Come on, if you really think you need the drug, just try the diet. You can't hurt him. You're not harming him. She just wouldn't do it.
Well, the
She
vet would
wanted to go with
say
what
that
the
she would
experts
be
told.
harming him. So
I know, and it was just heartbreaking, but I just had to keep going. And what was interesting for me, Nora, in this whole process was it was my guitar teacher's wife who had been using this diet. She found you. She's probably 9 months ahead of me. And her dog had had mange or something. And they healed that dog. Dog is fine. And she said, she wrote me a letter and she said, this is, you got to go buy this ebook. This is the website. I'm like, novetbills.com. That hallelujah. But anyway, I
about
got the
that
book.
name.
But she says to me, in the end of it, she says, good luck, all the best in Coco's healing. And I thought, wow, that is not the way that I viewed this, because I was told she had a condition.
Lifelong,
I had,
right? Incurable.
yes, I had to change my thinking.
Yeah. So
And I
you
thought,
bought
oh,
so you immediately bought the book and started feeding her properly. Did you get rid of the commercial raw right away?
oh my God, yes. I had just ordered, 22
no.
kilos of the frozen.
God. That always
And
happens.
oh my gosh. So I had all that. And then I had like a big bag of, no, I didn't have kibble anymore because I had taken that out earlier, about a month earlier. Yeah. So, yeah. But anyway, I had the quinoa, I had the sweet potatoes. So she was going to fast and she was going to have sweet potatoes and quinoa and bananas. And I've got one of those dogs that eats anything.
That's great. That's huge.
Yeah. So she started and that was fine. We had no problems with the food dog. And in fact, I was so liberated. It was like, wow, I'm not now looking for the right supplement or oil or food or this or that. I'm just
go to the grocery store, right?
Go to the grocery store. I had no idea about trimming the fat. I had no idea about, and in fact, so I told you that there are, stories of people who have healed their dog seizures with diet. I never heard anyone talk about trimming all the fat off. Never heard anyone talk about plant days and this stuff.
And a lot of times these people will even add more fats to the diet. They'll recommend like adding MCT oil and those kinds of things. I think, and that, just the change from kibble to commercial raw, you had a completely different experience. But sometimes when a dog is seizuring because they're eating kibble, sometimes just making the change to commercial raw is enough to allow the body to recover. and not have the problem continue. But when you're already starting from commercial raw, and besides, that's a halfway point, it's only a halfway point. It's not going to take you all the way to healthy, because
Right.
what's
To
in that commercial
reversal.
raw food is the products of animal agriculture. And I keep telling everybody, nature doesn't fatten animals for market. Nature doesn't do that.
Right.
Our dogs
Right.
evolved eating very lean meats.
Mm.
And it's important. It's a huge thing. It's huge. It's much huger than you would think. So
Yeah.
anyway, so what sort of rotation did you decide on?
So I started with PD.
Started with PD, which is 2 days of veggies and 1 day of meat.
One, isn't it? I think.
Two plants and 1 day meat, I think.
Yes. So we started with that, and obviously, the seizures continued, and they would be. We had to go. We had to go through that phase of getting her off the phenobarbital, because my husband and I agreed at a certain point. All right, we're going to take her off. It's doing nothing. All the vets are going to do is say, do more, do more, do more. I had come across the information about the refractory dog and thought, she's one of them. And you know what, Nora, I'm suspicious. I don't know this, but I'm suspicious that if you have a dog that is clustering with that, and we're not talking just 3 seizures in 12 hours. One time I counted 16 in over 4 days. 8 of those were in the same day. So, when you have a dog like that, they're reacting to some insult somewhere, and you got to get at it. You've got to get at it. But I also came across this principle that said, when you remove the insult, the seizures will most likely remit. So I just thought, okay, all we can do is see if we can get at this and just keep removing whatever the insult might be, or at least decrease the sensitivity. Whatever it is that makes that threshold so low that she's just got to go off. And when we started seeing the results from, being on the protocol, we went, she was 8 to 10 days, then 12 to 14 days. She would stay there for a couple of months.
How long had you gone? What was the frequency increasing? And while she was on before the drug and during the drug, how often were the seizures happening?
Let's say that was all 8 to 10 and 12 to 14 days. Every 8 to 10 days.
Okay, so every 8 to 10 days, she'd have a seizure before the drugs.
Well, remember, we didn't. What the vets don't let you learn their pattern. We didn't get to learn what her pattern was going to be.
Oh, I see. Okay, so yeah,
they don't.
The drugging came right away.
To them, it's a vet emergency. So we're going to get you on drugs, because we know what they observe is that the seizures will get worse and worse and worse and worse. And of course they will if you're drugging a refractory dog.
Removing the causes, right.
Or you're not removing the cause. So that's right. What they see. They're also only getting their information from compliant people, not people who just go, you know what, screw this, we're out of here. They don't know
exactly.
So how can we don't have a real balanced view of what actually happens, how dangerous seizures really are. Like I said, I can't even, and every time I would think am I doing something wrong? But what's remarkable, which we can talk about later, is some of the things that would happen after she'd have a cluster of seizures, when she was supposed to be, on intravenous phenobarbital in the emergency vet. You see what my point?
After you had changed her diet?
Yeah. So, once we changed the diet, they kept going, because obviously we were still on the phenobarbital. Okay. So I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. So,
no worries.
But then we decided we would titrate her off, and we did it specifically because some people are quite nonchalant about it, but we thought, we better do this over the course of a month. I think we took 6 weeks, and we just reduced it by a certain number of milligrams. I think I just found it online. So we took that out every day. We'd go less and less. And so she'd spend a week, let her system acclimatize to that. And then, but what was fascinating was that it doesn't matter. I don't know if it matters how you do it, because they're still going to have to go through that period where they don't have the neurotransmitters themselves because they're not making them. So she was absolutely beside herself. So we reached a point where she didn't know what, she was biting her paws. She was, in fact, I posted on the Facebook page, help me, what can I do here? But it's just, you got to ride it through. You got to ride it out, don't you? And so we did, but I knew what was going on, but that's when you question yourself a little bit and go, oh my God, did we do the right thing?
Your indication that it might be okay to start taking her off the drug. Did you see less frequency?
Oh, that's a very good question. No, our indication was okay, that's a good point. Our indication was we didn't see it helping.
So it didn't matter one way or the other, whether she took the drug or not.
It didn't matter if the diet, if this diet could not heal her. She could not heal without all of that crap. She wasn't going to heal because the medications were never going to heal her.
Right.
So where were we going to be in a year's time? That was, if we kept her on drugs, I had already been observing, I know that where it was going.
Right. How long after you started RMF did you see improvement? How long was it?
Improvements? Okay.
In her seizuring.
Okay, so I think there was a period where it got a little bit worse, but again, we were on RMF, but we were tapering off the phenobarbital. So we did see
lots happening there.
There's a lot going on. She's transitioning, she's losing weight, she's detoxifying. So I would say we had about 2 months of kind of pretty frequent. And not only were they frequent, I think she would, as I said, I never knew what her pattern would have been because we put her on drugs after three, 2 clusters of 3. So she started, her typical pattern was about, 12 to 15 seizures every time she would have a cluster, and it would happen over 4 or 5 days. We saw an immediate improvement with the diet in like the duration of the seizure. So they went.
Okay, so when she had one, it was shorter.
They went from 90 to about somewhere under a minute. Sometimes she would start and then stop. And now, or the most recent ones she had, they were under 10 seconds, 15 seconds, very short. In fact, sometimes you don't even notice it.
Oh, and so you said in your email that you had your first month seizure free, and you're on track for a second one. And so how long is it? Are you counting the days? Has it been like a month and a half or something?
Well, so I kind of said it in my excitement. So she went all of December with 0, didn't have one, which was unbelievable. And I thought, oh my God, it's a fluke. And then January came, and then she had a cluster. And that was, my husband was like, that wasn't typical. Maybe she's going to go again because she, and then, but nothing since then. So that was the 3rd of January. We're now where?
So that's 5 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're moving in a wonderful trajectory. And she's, what I'm so excited about are the changes in her, what has changed, how they happen after seizures. You see them. I saw an amazing changes in her. That was remarkable. That's been a remarkable process. That's why I look at it now and go, it's not, I don't even have control over this process. I don't know where it's going. It's more than I asked for.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that, because it reminds me of all those times during my own healing journey when I had a healing crisis and it felt so awful. And then when you're in it, you think, this isn't working. It's just not working. I feel worse. Why do I feel worse? And then you get through that and you realize, oh, it was cleansing, because that takes you to a higher level. And if
Exactly.
whatever is causing these seizures in Coco is related to stuff, being liberated, stored, harmful acidic substances being stored in the body and being liberated back into the bloodstream, and then encountering some part of the nerve sheath or whatever that still hasn't healed, if that's what's causing it, then that would be a good thing happening, because that stuff is coming out into the bloodstream and it's going out of the body forever.
And that is why I've started to look at this. See, when you're in the healing crisis and the symptoms occur, you freak out and you think, oh
Right.
no, what do I need to do? Do I need to change? Does she need more plants? It's
Right.
like, no, everything you did before led to this point, which you wanted. So why would you change now? It's like, no,
Just
that's
doesn't
when I had to
look
stay on
good.
track the most.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. And there were
Yeah.
so many times, and I can tell you how you can, because she would have so many seizures back to back to back, and sometimes she would have one and then go right into another. And, anybody would look at me and go, you're crazy. You need to get that dog to the vet. But imagine, a vet observing that situation with a different perspective wouldn't realize you're healing, your dog is going this way, not that way. So they're going to mistake it for degeneration when
Exactly. Right.
actually it's a reversal. And I thought that I kind of understood disease reversal. I don't think I had ever experienced anything like it in my life, going through an actual, what they call in homotoxicology, regressive vicariation. I don't even know if I believed it was possible, but now I actually am
Got it.
confident
Right.
it is possible. It has been
Right.
amazing.
Yeah. The symptoms can look the same. And I keep telling people it looks the same, whether you've cleaned up your diet, cleaned up your dog's diet, and they're going through this detox and stuff coming out. The symptoms of that look the same as when you were feeding your dog garbage and they got to that tipping point and the body said, I got to get this stuff out of here, which leads to the lethargy and the lack of appetite and other symptoms in dogs, symptoms of degeneration. But anyway, it looks the same. And
Yeah.
it's so hard to convince people to not be frightened when they see it, when it's part of the healing process. And we natural hygienists are wide open to ridicule and just being put down by medical types, by veterinary followers who say, well, that doesn't work. Obviously, it doesn't work. Well, the thing is, when the symptom happens as a part of detox, it just happens once. It happens a couple times, and then it's gone forever. You don't have to manage it for the life of the dog. You don't have to sacrifice those vital organs that are trying to neutralize the
Right.
dog on a daily basis. So, I mean,
Yes.
clearly, I mean, obviously, it's a better way.
Well, thank you for that, because that leads me into one thing that I think has really been important, and that is, how our healing crises, because there were many of them, and it would always be precipitated by this dog that would look so beautiful. You would look at her, and I would look at her eyes, and her coat was white and gorgeous, and I would say, wow, you look so great. And then boom, there we go. And this happened over and over and over again. So I got to the point where I was like a little bit nervous about seeing her looking really good, because I knew that the body had just mustered up enough energy for the next wave of whatever was coming. But we did have a real acute phase of detox. We had, after about, I would
Yeah.
say, so 8 to 10 weeks in, we're kind of good. She's losing weight, but she just looks great. Her energy's good. She's still fitting 12 to 14 days. And then she has a series of fits. And after that, she's blind. I mean, she's blind. She cannot see. She is smelling us because she doesn't know where she is. She can't get out of tight corners. She's head pressing. She's peeing in the house. She's disoriented. She's walking around not knowing what to do. She's skinny as hell. Everybody is ridiculing us, telling us, we're being negligent. That was the hardest point. I think that was when we contemplated, are we really doing the right thing and by our dog? And are we going to get through this, or are we going to have to put her down? And we even had a meeting with the boys and said, look, this is our little girl here, and nobody wants to lose her, but we've got to be realistic, because in fact, if you look at the definition, interesting, of a healing crisis, I had it written down, but I can't remember what it is, but it basically talks about a significant turning point that will either result in recovery or basically death or going the other way. In other words, it is dramatic. A healing crisis is dramatic. And you don't know where you are. You've never been there before. You don't know if you're going up, down. You're not in control of the process. You can't do a damn thing about it. It is just happening. So here we are with this dog who's blind and skinny, and I'm dying inside. I'm crying every day because I'm just like, we're going to lose her. And then we get the visit from the RSPCA on top of that. But I can tell you, because you were talking about the transient nature of these things, the blindness lasted about 4 days, and then it started to taper. It might not even been that long. It started to taper off. Every time after a cluster for a long while, she was disoriented for a while. The peeing thing happened, more than once. But the blindness, and the real kind of just pacing around like dementia, waiting at the hinge side of the door, that one? Oh my God, yes, she had that. So I was like, oh, so this is where we were when we also had a visit from the RSPCA. And you talk about, being so difficult to hang on in those times.
Tell us a little bit about that. What did they do? So you were reported for being neglectful of
a skinny
dog or
dog.
something?
I was reported for a skinny dog, but I just want to say real quick, I was hanging on to the good things that I was seeing. I was hanging on to the fact that, the blindness wasn't staying there. If she had continued to be blind, I would have been worried. If she had continued to pee in the house, I would have been worried. But I kept saying, why is she not, this has to be a good thing, not a bad thing, right? And then I have to say, one day, I was in the middle of this desperate moment, and Kelly Jo, who often I don't know, she has she just sort of sometimes seems to just post something and it's what you need. And she posted this thing about detox, and she's like, look, if you're worried about anything, or you just these are the symptoms of detox. And this is the difference between detox and disease or whatever. And anyway, it was some sort of just a one sheet flyer type thing that had all these symptoms. It was like blindness and disorientation and lethargy we had. I mean, Coco nearly collapsed on walks sometimes. In fact, I wish I wouldn't have taken her so many walks. That's probably why I exposed her to the RSPCA thing, because I was taking her out when she just needed to rest. So they do get tired. She was lethargic for 2-3 months. But anyway, then in the corner it said, all temporary. And I thought, thank you, Kelly Jo, for posting that today. I needed to see that today, because that's what's happening. These things are not holding on. These things are temporary. And I was so grateful, because I knew that I was probably dealing with detox and not a degenerative condition that was just getting worse, because we were still experiencing the symptoms. We were still getting those seizures. So are seizures bad? Are they terrible? Are they an emergency? Are they good? What? We're not getting the whole picture about what's going on here. Nobody really understands, but her body was clearly doing something. And I thought that was an important part in my journey to hold on, was to just kind of look out there, and at a perfect moment, there was somebody on the other side that said, hey, you're all right. stay on track, you know. But anyway, when the RSPCA came, my husband was there and he said to me, Paige, they need a warrant to get in here. You don't need to let her in. And he stood at the door with me, and we very politely said, hey, you know, we're not in the business of neglecting our animals. Look around you. We've got chickens. We've got a fat cat here on the post, you know, and we've got quails. And she says, yeah, I can tell. So we didn't let her in. You know, we just very politely said, look, you know, I said to her, I said, listen, lady, I have borne my heart to my neighbors. They know what I'm going through. I have told them I am going through a process, and they have turned on me. I said, what makes me think that you won't turn on me too? I said, how do I know you're not going to look at my dog and judge her and judge me? Because I can make up a story about anything as I observe in this life, anything. But when I said, you know, I don't know who you are. I learned I can't trust everybody. It's very sad to be in this place, but I'm sorry, you know, I can't let you see her. I'm in the middle of a process, and we need to protect that process and protect our dog. And I said, I have written down every single seizure she's had. I have lived this life. I have been up at 3 o'clock in the morning wiping, you know, spit off and pee and taking her outside. This has been my situation. You don't know that because you're not living it. So, you know, I just hope you'll have some respect for us. And she was virtually in tears, and she left and she said, I'm so sorry. She said, I'm really sorry. You guys.
Who could listen to that and go, no, I insist on seeing you. I mean, of course you're a caring, conscientious dog owner. It's ridiculous. And it's the neighbors that are negligent. It's the neighbors because they're dumping kibble in their dog's bowl every day and not worrying about the disease that it caused, just drugging the disease away. You know?
Well, my neighbor had been insisting, you know, that I use the Purina one for seizures. Right. So I was like, I'm sorry, but I'm on a different book, lady. I'm reading a different book. Why don't you get that dog to the vet? You know, you got to get that dog to the vet. It's like, oh God, you just don't understand.
Like they have answers.
Well, that was the problem. Is I said to her, I said, look, they didn't have an answer for us. We tried the vet. We went there. We bought the product. It screwed up our dog even worse. So no, we are trying something else. But here is another beautiful thing that happened, Nora, in that. So we're going through this phase, you know, she's skinny, she's eating rocks, she's desperately foraging for everything. She's, you know, we had the visit from the RSPCA, we've had the blindness, is kind of subsiding, and she's just sort of more dopey, not dopey, but disoriented. She'd pace around a lot. And then we kind of move through that cycle. Obviously, she's still having the seizures, but we move it out. We're pushing it out now. So probably after that extreme episode, she probably had another cluster, but shortly after, it seemed like her next episode was about 21 days later. So we started to see them coming no sooner than about 21 days. Then it went out to about 26 days, just before 26, 28 days, just before where we are now. But anyway, one of those points closer to where we are now, but not so close. I was outside with the dog. We were just throwing the ball, and all of a sudden, a week earlier than that, Coco had decided that it would be a good idea to let go of the ball so that I could throw it to her, which she never did in her life.
Oh, really?
Never did. You'd give that dog a ball. Yeah, you give her a ball. You weren't going to get it off her. I mean, my husband could, because she kind of looks at him like, oh yeah, he's the serious one. I'll drop it. But she'd never give me that ball. I'd have to pick it up, and her feet would come off the ground. Yeah. She would never give me that ball. So here, we're in the process of this, and suddenly she decides, no, it works much better if I drop the ball. So she starts dropping the ball, and here we are. And to this day, she'll drop it. She won't drop it at my
working
feet.
Better.
I know. So she won't drop it at my feet, but she'll sit there and drop it and put it down in her paws like, you can come and get it now. Anyway, the interesting thing was she had put on some weight. I had told the woman at the RSPCA, look, we're gaining weight. This is where we were. This is where we are. I can tell you, I've got a note of it. I'm keeping track of it. Anyway, she was looking real pretty good at this point. And we were outside, and the neighbors came out with their dogs, and we started throwing the ball. And of course, Coco's playing now. She's not holding on to the ball. And her husband looked at me and said, well, "What? Well, that's quite a change. She looks great." I don't know if he knew about the phone call and the visit.
Oh, and the
Right.
the rep, the agent was still there.
No. Sorry, she'd gone.
She gone.
She'd written the
Okay.
thing. This was later. Sorry. This is a week or so. I don't know. No, it was probably a month or so later. Because after, by the way, she left, dropped the case, said no problems here. The RSPCA woman. But anyway, this was later on down the healing road when we were outside playing ball, and my neighbor came out, and she looked at her. She looked at Coco, and her jaw hit the floor. And she
So
said,
she saw the change, and she's seeing it only as weight gain, right? She's seeing the weight gain. Is that what she's remarking about?
"What's that?"
So she saw the weight gain, and that's what she was remarking about?
Well, she saw the weight gain. She saw the ball. She saw the fact that Coco was a lot, had her energy back, and she was kind of lively again. And she said to me, "Surely you must have put her on some vet recommended dog food, right?" And I said, "No." I said, "Surely we've been going through a process, a long one, but a very thorough one. And, look at her now." She could not believe it. But I felt so, like, in that moment, it was like I never had to get angry at her. I never had to worry about the whole situation. And life had just been so thorough in this process that it was going to come around and take care of that little situation too. So she knew at that point she made a mistake. The
Wonder,
pressure that she,
to me, I'm thinking she's probably thinking that that visit from the RSPCA turned you around and made you start feeding your dog more, because that's what these people think, that you're underfeeding your dog. And
it
that's
might
what,
be, but her reaction was different. It was different. I think I could feel there was like a sense almost of guilt, almost
oh,
like,
good.
wow. Yeah, I definitely got a vibe from that, where, because, I made it very clear that we didn't change food, and we didn't change our direction, and
Yeah.
she was like, "Oh." So she couldn't, you know what it was more like, Nora? She couldn't compute, does not compute, does
Right.
not. I don't see how these things can be, skinny dog, eat more food, eat more vet food, we're okay. People think like robots. They don't actually think, no process,
I know. It's
healing
cognitive
process.
dissonance. It keeps them from
Yeah.
recognizing the truth, because they can't
Yeah,
live it. If they recognize something as truth, that means it would conflict with what they're doing every single day. And that's really uncomfortable. Unless
that's right.
you
And so,
align what you know with what you do, then it creates a conflict in your mind constantly. So people just, they refuse to
and
accept the truth.
that's what I felt. There was such dissonance there that she couldn't even take it. Like, she went inside. She couldn't even handle it. And I
Right.
thought, great, I didn't need to get all angry and waste my energy and substance on that, because I'm really in the process of doing something else. And it was like, it was like just a little bit. It was like life going, well, we're just gonna take care of a little housekeeping here. Just go on over there, and we're gonna clean that little situation up. I was like, yeah, because it was just, this process is so thorough. That's how I feel. And you can't do it. You can't control it.
Has to happen.
It's gonna
It
amaze
just has to
you what
happen. Right.
happens.
Yeah.
But we had two more really remarkable kind of, I don't know if you had another question or anything before I
Well, I
just,
do want to talk about what you fed specifically, but
yeah.
and then we can wrap up, but go ahead and tell us about those other
So
things.
just want to say that, in terms of the positive changes that would happen after clusters, she one of the things that was very interesting, Nora, is that she had, I guess it was 4 or 5 months in, I saw that she had one pupil bigger than the other.
Oh, uh-huh.
And the left, yeah, and you look that up, and it's a sign of neurological disorders, isn't it? And so I thought, it's just going to be this way. She's just got neurological disorders. We're just going to have to deal with that, or whatever. And then, but she keeps sort of having this, we're pushing the seizures out. They're really mild. They're not a big problem. Everything in that respect is changing. She's looking healthy and all this. Well, then she has a cluster of, several seizures, probably 12, 15 over the course of about 4 days, as she has always done. And she came out of that seizure with her pupils exactly the same, and they've never gone back.
Isn't that interesting? It makes me think that something was cycling through and it just affected the mechanism behind the eye or something. And
Maybe.
even when a vet would say, well, this is a neurological problem, that's another symptom. That's not a cause. There's a cause for neurological problems. So, and sometimes
Yeah.
it's poisoning. Sometimes it's a poisoning event. Like sometimes when these dogs have seizures following the flea and tick meds. But a lot of it, and you never know what part is caused by something like that and what part is caused by the ongoing misfeeding of the dog. And you can't take stuff back that you've already administered to the dog. So all you can do from this point on is to start feeding properly. And in the vast
I
majority
also
of
think,
cases, it clears things up.
yeah, absolutely. And I also think there was definitely an intestinal dysbiosis in there, and I
All
do
goes
think,
together.
yeah, when you look at the gut and you look at what seizures are in terms of the neurotransmitter activity, and the the fact that a lot of the inhibitory neurotransmitters are produced in the gut. And I came across a study on these, they had done on these rats, where they had induced epilepsy in the rats to kind of examine what was in the gut. And they found, obviously, that they didn't have the bacteria that supports the GABA, which is synthesized in the gut, isn't it? So then they fasted these rats, and they found that suddenly they were recolonized with the bacteria that produces GABA.
Interesting. The
Yes,
probiotic sellers will tell us that won't happen unless you
I
introduce
know.
it to the body. But then what happens when we see all of these things, all of this balance happening, all of the body rebalancing itself when absolutely nothing is fed to the animal or the person? They're not taking anything by mouth except water,
Yeah,
and
I mean,
things rebalance.
that was phenomenal. Yeah, and
Oh,
they saw that 50%, I think, over 50% of them had a total remission in their seizures after that, and then the other 50 had, or it was over 50, and the rest of them had just a reduction in frequency. So we know that the gut plays a massive part in the brain function too. So really, I'm at the point where it doesn't actually matter. I mean, they also talk about the genetic markers. Just because something is genetic, as we know, it doesn't mean it has to be expressed.
right,
So you have to have a combination of factors. So if we
right.
can reduce the burden and allow the body's elimination to, that's what I saw Coco. She suddenly just felt like she could deal with everything. She had a thorough detox. I mean, we definitely reversed. Um, in fact, the way I looked at it, Nora, is what we saw when we were going through these uh, processes is where we were headed.
Right.
And what we saw just before the healing crisis, when she was just glowing and beautiful, which is more how she looks now, which is why I'm like, oh, don't hit me again. Um, she, I would say that's where we're going. I think that's where we're going to end up, is how I would feel in my heart. I was like, that is where we're going to go, but we're not going there yet. But these things have to be, you have to kind of be willing to go back through them. And
Yes.
one of the interesting things that's just happened with her over the last week or so is she spent the entire part of, and this happened after the phenobarbital, so I don't know if it caused some further, I don't know enough about these AEDs, but she started to run, and she would have her mouth closed and breathe out of the sides of her mouth.
Yeah.
You go back and look at a video of her running, or a picture of her running before all of this happened. The tongue is out, the jaw is loose, the tongue's floppy, the teeth, you can see the teeth. That's a relaxed jaw, very loose. And 1 year, Well, just the other day, I think it was like last Sunday, I came back from a walk and I said, Alex, she was the whole time with her mouth open, her tongue out. I saw her teeth. I have not seen that in a year.
Never heard of that. I don't know what that might be connected to.
And so now every day I'm looking at her mouth, and I sent you that picture that was from today where she's sitting there with the tongue out and the mouth open, because that's where we are
It's
today.
normal, that's normal. So there
That's
was
a
something
normal
else going on.
dog.
Yeah. And they call there's a name for that when you go back through your symptoms on the way to healing. It's called retracing. And it
Yeah.
happened to me too. I mean, and some of the symptoms that I experienced when I was healing were worse than they were before I changed things up. So, like when you're in it, it feels awful, but it's healing. That's the way it looks. That's the way it
And
feels.
that's with seizures. That's why I wanted to, I think, because we're so afraid of them when they happen. And the vets say, oh, did she have 3? Then get her in. And then all they do is tell you what you already knew, that she's all right. Or they'll use diazepam, and then because they want to see the vitals at a certain level. But I don't know, Nora. I mean, I tried diazepam at one point. I kind of kept it with me throughout the acute phase because I thought I might need it. But then I tried not to use it because one time I did use it and it made it worse. She just had another fit. So do all dogs react the same? Do we need to go in and manipulate their vitals
Right,
directly
exactly.
after a
That's what I
seizure?
was just going to bring up. Is it really dangerous to allow
That's
this to continue? Do dogs die of the seizures or do they die of the drugs? When they die, when these dogs are tracked and when they become a statistic, they've generally been seen by a vet, and that means they're drugged. And so how do we
that's
know
right.
whether they died from whatever was cycling through that caused the heart to malfunction or whatever during a seizure, or if the body was just put under too much of a burden dealing with the drugs? And they won't look at that. They won't go there.
No, no. And I did hear of a dog that had, and this was the daughter of the woman whose dog was just put down because, again, he was, it was pretty far gone. But their dog, their puppy, had a 40-minute seizure. He was not on medication. So they can be serious, but obviously the way I started to look at it, well, there are 2 things. I'm not comfortable with a seizure that goes on past 3 minutes.
Oh,
That would be a little bit alarming because then you're going to have hypothermia, or hypothermia, brain. No, what's the other one where they get too hot, don't they? Anyway,
hyperthermia or shock.
yeah,
I mean, shock can kill. Probably go into shock.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
can't really, anyway, they also, you can get brain damage and all sorts of things. And then you can have cardiac arrest and it can just get terrible. Anyway, I
Yeah.
reckon it can go on for probably longer than that safely, but I never had to deal with that. Ours were from the very beginning at their worst. They were no more than about 2 minutes. I would say, um, yeah, that's what I would. And then they just got, and now it, as I said, so I'm quite comfortable with them and very relaxed. And I just think there's a lot of unfounded hysteria, and there needs to be a balanced perspective when it comes to
Right.
this, because if we go in and we start meddling, especially with a dog that is refractory, is that going to just make it worse? The other thing is, I knew we were in a process. So when you're in a process, you have to expect change. So when the symptoms did appear worse for a while, and the seizures were bad, and when we were coming off the phenobarbital and they were bad, bad. That's a judgment. They were what they were, but we were in a process, and that's what kept me going, because it was like I'm at the ready if I need the diazepam, sort of thing. But can she get through this without it? Can she? And she did. She
Okay.
did. So I used it
Super.
once in a very early stage. I never used it again,
Good. Okay. Super.
ever, and didn't have to, because I didn't want to interrupt what was a process that I knew might be important. I didn't want to meddle.
And there's costs associated with administering those things just for the luxury of not seeing it happen, and which is basically what's happening. You just creating an illusion for yourself. There's no more problem because there's no more outward
It's just
seizure.
an illusion.
Yeah.
And we have to be strong enough to just go through the process, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, that does take some fortitude for sure. So I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you, I think that the plant meals in RMF are explained pretty much in the book, but sometimes the meat part is it stymies some people, like what kinds of meats. And also I've had a lot of people, there's a lot of members in the Facebook group in the UK and in other countries, especially the UK. And they say, well, what's the equivalent of a Cornish game hen? Because here in the US, we have something called a Cornish game hen. It's just an immature chicken. They're killed when they're 4 or 5 weeks old. So they don't have as much fat on them. They don't have as much toxicity accumulated in their bodies. So they're just a little bit healthier. The bone to meat ratio is better. The bones are more digestible. But there doesn't seem to be an equivalent in the UK. So I'm wondering what you fed your dog, and she's probably like a normal 40-pound Springer, something like 40, 50 pounds, something like that.
Yeah, she's on the low end, like, yeah, in that range. That's her ideal weight, is about 40 pounds, but I haven't been able to get her quite there. She's probably around 38, and she looks
Okay.
good right now. She's still skinny.
Mhm.
So what do we feed? I do
And meat.
chicken drumsticks. I do chicken thighs. I just get store-bought. I just take all the skin off and just do that. I buy ox heart, pig heart. Occasionally I'll put pig's liver or calf's liver or something in there. I can get that from the butcher. Chicken liver, you can get that. And I'll do sardines. I'll just chop up. I'll mix all that together.
And when you say
I'll
sardines, these are raw fish.
raw
Yes.
sardines and
Okay.
raw mackerel,
Okay.
and just whole.
Yes. Okay.
Or whatever fish they have at the fish counter, I'll just put that in there. And I'll feed rabbit or pheasant when I get that from the butcher, because this is the season. So you can, because they're shooting now, so you can get her a whole pheasant. And I've
Yeah,
got two
that's
in the
one thing
freezer.
that you guys have access to that's practically unheard of here in the US, unless you go out and kill your own game. It's
That's right.
impossible to lay your hands on wild meat around here in this
Right.
country.
And it's 4 pounds for a pheasant. I can get partridge breasts or whatever as well. I can get whole
Oh.
rabbit, £5. I just go and get it out of the freezer, and then that's a few meals. So she gets good variety. I tell you that I'm now on a high meat rotation. I do not worry about the type of meat. I do not say, oh, more of this or less of that, or more plant or this or that. I do not do that. Quite frankly, I think the diet heals.
And the rotation doesn't matter. It matters more to the convenience and the situation and the circumstances of the owner rather than the dog, because anything within this range will heal the dog. So so is she like 1-to-1 or even more meat days?
I do more, Nora. So what happened was, she was all along, she's been a forager. So like, I mean, literally eating anything. At one point I found Nerf bullets in her poop, and like one time a 2p I'm just like, oh my God. So that kind of changed a little bit. She won't eat that kind of stuff. What's that?
Dog's eating your money. That's expensive.
Oh my God, I know. Yeah, well, she isn't doing that. She's not going to the vet. But anyway, she would eat. She just seemed really hungry when I was, so I went from 2-1 to 1-1. So I'd go 1 wheat, 1 plant. Fast sometimes if I felt she needed it. Don't do a huge amount of fasting. I have it in my arsenal for when I need it, and I know I can use it. And I went 1-1, and but also I needed her to build her muscle. She seemed to have lost a lot of muscle. So I really wanted to see her build up the muscle. I also read that the dogs with neurological problems need to have plenty of taurine and tyrosine. They get that from their meats, and a variety of meats. Meat is easy to get. I can get a whole ox heart here, come home and just, you know what I mean? I can get beef neck bones from my butcher friend. There's so much available. So I basically take 5 days a week. Sometimes it's 4, depending on what her needs are. I just do, so this is different. This one wasn't in the book. This was just me, what works for me. On Sunday, I just prep all the meat meals so they're ready to go. And I worked it out that she eats the same amount of meat that she would on the 2-1. she just eats it in smaller portions over the course of the week. So it's the same amount of food. Um, and then on the weekends, we do plants. And sometimes I'll extend that to the Monday. And if she's, but the thing about it too, Nora, that's so amazing is that, we live in England. There are apples on the trees in the fields. There are mushrooms in the fields. There are pheasants in the hedges. So on plant days, when she would go out into the field and come back out of the hedge crunching bones, what was I going to do? She found a dead bird or whatever, and she ate it. She's healed anyway.
It happens, right?
On meat days, she'd go and she knows where those apples are, and she will go every time to the same place searching for those apples. I'm not going to not let her eat those delicious apples that have just fallen off the tree that are just slightly fermented.
Yeah.
She'll go into the field now where the sheep are, and she'll eat the mangel which are like these fermented like beet, sugar beet type things.
Oh,
she loves them.
Hmm.
And you know what? I realized, because I saw so much progress and so much promise, and at first I was so scared, like, she's eating a pheasant and it's plant day.
Yeah, right.
I did. I was like,
oh. That's part of a bigger problem. I think people expecting prescriptions, and all of those protocols are suggestions. I've tried to explain it in the book and over in the Facebook group and in my videos. They're suggestions, they're starting points. They're for you if you need that, if you need somebody to tell you, feed this on this day and this on this day, you can do that, but you don't have to. All you have to do is stay within the range of foods that we know dogs, that are conducive to healing in dogs.
Right. And they do, and that heals. They heal. Like, I have no question about what is the right and appropriate food for the dog. I also know that if I run into she's a young dog, she's an energetic dog, she probably needs more meat. As she gets older, I have the wonderful ability to say, we're changing the protocol. I mean, how wonderful and freeing and liberating.
And I'm so glad you said that, because I'm always trying to impart that to people too. When you go through this process, I know it feels really insecure at first, because nobody's telling you exactly what to feed your dog every day. But when you go through that process of discovering what your dog really needs and following the symptoms, seeing what they, just following the behavior. Like, if a dog forages too much, it typically means that they just need a little more meat in their diet to keep them satisfied. But once you go through that process, then you have the wherewithal to make those decisions in the future. And you will have to, because dogs get more efficient at using food. And as they get into their senior years, they get less efficient at eliminating waste. So you have to decrease the most producing foods, which is generally the meat, because of those.
And that makes sense to me. And that's one of the things that I rest in. It's like, I know that I've got that freedom, and that we can do that. If I'd exhausted all my my tools, it's like we have all these wonderful tools now that we
can independence.
Fast, we can use the plants. Yeah, it's so wonderful, Nora, and it's been so freeing. And the other thing I think is so important is, you said so many times, you pop on the Facebook group and go, hey guys, look, chill out. It's a process. It takes time. You've got to allow time. And you're in the heart of it, and you think, I can't take 10 months of this though. But the thing is, with each thing that you have to endure, there's something wonderful that comes outside of that. And then you've got another problem or another thing to deal with, but you've gained something from that moment. And so I felt that there was no one problem that was just boom, boom, sustained for 10 months. It was like my problems would shift. And each time I felt like, there was a point, Nora, I have to say, where I felt like I can't take it anymore. I don't know how much more I can take. And it was at that point where she made a vibrational shift, an energetic shift. I could see it. I knew it. I felt it. No one else could see it at that point. But I'm the one that's sort of really attuned to the process that she's in. And I think that's when I just went, okay, Paige, we're still all right. So it was almost like right at that point, life just took me to the edge of my patience and said, all right, we're going to let up here for you. But I think that's what it does. I think it tests us to see you know, and but time is on our side. And with
And
time, if I can,
I'm so glad you persevered through all of that. And I hope everything continues to be as great as it has been. And I want you to stay in touch with me and let me know how Coco's doing and all of that.
I will, I absolutely will. And, you know, I'm quite happy to, you know, chime in anywhere on this conversation with what our experience, because it's a huge topic and there's a lot, I think, to, as I said before, hysteria. And I think if people could just remain calm, you know, if I could have come here first, I think the process
You have to go through
remains
that. You
so,
learn something from that. Every time I have an interaction with a vet, I learn something. It's awful,
yeah,
you know, to deal with these people who just want to drug your dog, but you always learn. You learn from every
yeah.
situation. So it would be great to have a conversation in a year and see how
See where she is.
Coco's
Absolutely.
doing.
Let's do.
Yeah, and if you
Mm,
had any more experiences and all of that. So
yeah. Any more changes?
but we're getting
I'm,
really
I'm, I'm
long on
open.
time here, so we better wrap up.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, but it's been really fun and really fun talking to you and meeting you, Paige. And I'm sure this will help a lot of people who are having seizuring dogs. I just hope lots of people find it. That's the hardest part on YouTube, getting
Yes, me
found.
too.
When you type in seizures in dogs and you're going to get, 50 videos with vets talking about the various drugs that your dogs can take. And
Well, they're also looking at things to do from the outside, you know, oh, just give them this, give them the CBD, give them that, give them this thing, and the seizures
product
will stop.
selling,
But
right?
we don't want just the seizures to stop, because that's not what the problem is, as you said. And
Yes.
that's not, you
Right.
know, if you really want to get at the root. So it's not, it's not the life sentence that they say it is. Not,
Yes.
I don't believe so.
And
Not,
there's so
it
many
doesn't have to be.
conditions. There's so many conditions that they say it's a life sentence, just drug your dog. So
Yeah.
anyway, we better sign off here before we get
Great.
too long. I think we're like hour and 20 minutes or something. So
Oh,
I feel like we could
all right.
talk
Well,
all day
lovely to
about
talk
this.
to you. And again, thanks for yeah, just opening the airspace for this, because it's, you know, been a wonderful process. Well, it's been an amazing process, and I've learned a lot, changed a lot, grown a lot. And, you know, thanks to you, Nora, because if it was left up to me to figure out that I could just throw some quinoa and sweet potatoes and hey, we're on our way, I think I'd still be looking, probably with a dog on drugs
Yeah.
or worse.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right.
so
Well, it's been fun, Paige. Thank you so much. And
thank you,
we'll
Nora.
check in again maybe in a year.
Sounds good. All right,
All
take care.
right. Bye-bye.
Bye.